The early morning glow bathed Concord International Airport in soft gold as its cavernous terminals buzzed with a familiar symphony of rolling suitcases, garbled announcements, and the caffeine-fueled determination of business travelers. But beyond the commotion, past the layers of security and duty-free temptations, there was a different world, one of polished silence and curated calm, the first-class lounge. Inside, everything was designed to soothe. Marbled floors glimmered beneath artful lighting, and the scent of citrus-scented polish blended subtly with fresh espresso and warm pastries. Executives in custom suits thumbed through the news on tablets, while attendants moved like shadows, efficient and invisible. When Elias and Nia Morrow stepped through the frosted glass doors of the lounge, the room barely registered their arrival. Their appearance was elegant, yet understated. Elias wore a navy blazer over a crisp white shirt, his salt and pepper beard trimmed, eyes hidden behind tortoise-shell glasses. Nia, with her intricate box braids pulled back into a low bun, wore a cream turtleneck tucked into high-waisted slacks, minimal gold jewelry catching the light when she moved. To the average observer, they were just another affluent couple preparing for a cross-continental flight. But not everyone was average. Behind the polished counter, a young lounge assistant named Rachel glanced up from her screen. The polite smile on her face wavered for the briefest second. Her eyes moved to the first-class marker on their tickets, then back to their faces. Something in her gaze flickered, not quite disdain, not overt hostility, but the quiet shadow of disbelief. "Good morning," she greeted with practiced cheer. "May I see your boarding passes?" Elias handed them over, his expression unreadable. Rachel scanned the tickets, then looked up again. "First class to Marseille. Wonderful. Please. Make yourselves comfortable." Her smile brightened a little too suddenly. "We'll begin boarding in about 40 minutes. "Merci," Nia replied, her French accent just subtle enough to raise an eyebrow. As they walked away, she leaned in slightly toward her husband and murmured, "She wasn't expecting us." Elias smirked. "Most don't." They found a quiet corner near the fireplace, where the chairs were softer and the silence deeper. As they sat, Nia pulled out a slim leather tablet case and opened a document titled, "Internal Culture Audit, Phase 2. "We already knew," she said, keeping her voice low, "that minority passengers score our premium service lower across the board. Now we're going to see what the day-to-day actually feels like." Elias nodded, scanning the lounge. "Our data tells one story. Human behavior tells another." They weren't just another power couple on a leisure trip. Elias was the founder and current board chair of Aerolume Airlines, a fast-growing transatlantic carrier known for its luxury and innovation. Nia was the company's chief strategy officer. Between them, they controlled not just decisions but the soul of the airline. But for the purpose of this flight, no one knew that. Not the staff. Not the passengers. And certainly not the flight crew on Flight AL-184. This wasn't a vanity exercise. After multiple anonymous complaints and a troubling internal report about microaggressions targeting first-class passengers of color, Elias and Nia had agreed, if they were going to lead real change, they had to step into the experience themselves. They dressed modestly but tastefully. No bodyguards. No assistants. Their full names weren't printed on the manifest. Their tickets were booked through a trusted liaison, and no staff had been notified in advance. Nia closed the file on her tablet and crossed one leg over the other. "I wonder," she said, "how long it will take for someone to ask us if we're in the wrong seats." Elias gave a slow, quiet laugh. "Under 5 minutes after we board." "Bold," she said. "Experience," he countered. Their conversation was interrupted by a sharply dressed lounge server, older, silver-haired, and gracious in every movement. He bowed slightly. "Coffee or perhaps a glass of Prosecco before your flight?" "Just coffee, please," Elias said. "Same for me," Nia added, smiling. The man nodded and disappeared with the grace of someone who'd worked in 5-star hotels his entire life. Elias exhaled softly, gaze drilling toward the windows where the morning sun lit up the tarmac. "Do you ever wish," he asked quietly, "we didn't have to keep proving we belong in rooms we built?" Nia paused. "I wish people saw how exhausting it is. That confidence isn't armor, it's adaptation." Their coffee arrived, accompanied by an offer of pastries and fresh fruit. They declined. A few lounge guests glanced over. Some held their gazes a second too long. Others did that quiet, practiced thing, the look and look away, as if curiosity could be masked by indifference. Nia returned her focus to the document in her lap, but her attention remained split. She was listening. Watching. Feeling. "It's subtle," she whispered. "But it's always there." Elias nodded without replying. Soon, the boarding announcement echoed gently through the lounge, Flight AL-184 to Marseille now boarding. First-class passengers may proceed to Gate 8. They stood, collected their things, and made their way to the gate where the same lounge assistant, Rachel, stood ready to scan their tickets. This time, she offered a real smile, sheepish around the edges. Something about them had changed in her eyes. Perhaps it was the way they moved. Or maybe it was guilt. Elias gave a polite nod as they passed through. "Merci," Nia said again. The jet bridge was quiet. The air smelled like recycled air and jet fuel. When they stepped onto the aircraft, they were greeted by a young flight attendant who smiled warmly and guided them to seats 1A and 1B. But standing just beyond her, arms folded and posture precise, was the lead flight attendant. Tall. Blonde. Perfectly pressed. Her nameplate read, "C. Dunn." She didn't smile. Didn't nod. Just studied them for a beat too long before speaking. "Can I help you?" she asked. Nia raised an eyebrow. "We're in seats 1A and 1B. C. Dunn didn't move." She flicked her eyes to the boarding passes, then to the couple. "This section is for first class only," she said. Elias's voice was calm. "We're aware." Another pause. Then the younger attendant quickly stepped forward. "It's fine, Ms. Dunn. They're on the list." C. Dunn's eyes narrowed, but she stepped aside. "Of course," she said. "Welcome aboard." As they settled into their seats, Nia leaned toward Elias. "And so it begins," she whispered. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the aircraft taxied away from the gate, a low mechanical hum underscoring the movement. The first-class cabin, cocooned in elegance and quiet, promised peace, but beneath that hush, tension stirred. C. Dunn, the lead flight attendant, walked the aisle with practiced poise, checking belts, glancing over shoulders, occasionally offering smiles that never quite made it to her eyes. She hadn't stopped watching Elias and Nia since they boarded. She passed them once more, paused just long enough to ask, "Would either of you care for a glass of champagne?" Her tone was clean and professional. But the undertone, that slightly forced smile, that glint in her eyes, spoke of something colder. "Just water for now," Nia said, her voice gentle but deliberate. "Same," Elias added, not looking up from his screen. Dunn gave a tight nod and moved on. The younger attendant, Mia, returned a few minutes later with a tray of drinks. She placed 2 glasses of water on their fold-out tables and whispered, "Let me know if you need anything." Her kindness didn't go unnoticed. Across the aisle, an older man with a silk scarf and tailored blazer eyed the couple as if trying to solve a riddle. A woman a row ahead of them peeked over her shoulder twice, whispering something to her travel companion each time. Nia noticed it all. It was the slow creep of discomfort, like condensation sliding down a glass. It wasn't hostile, not yet, but it was rooted in something familiar. Doubt. Misplaced suspicion. The assumption that their presence was some kind of anomaly. Elias caught her gaze and offered a knowing nod. They'd seen this before, in boardrooms, restaurants, hotels. The reaction was almost predictable, a mental equation being calculated in real time. Brown skin plus first class equals ? "I wonder when the storm will actually hit," Nia murmured, her voice like wind through tall grass. "Cruising altitude," Elias replied. "That's when people get bold." True to his word, the first major shift came about 45 minutes into the flight. C. Dunn reappeared, this time holding a tablet and stylus. She moved from passenger to passenger, confirming meal selections. Her posture was a little too straight, her steps a little too sharp, like someone preparing for confrontation under the veil of formality. When she reached 1A and 1B, her expression hardened slightly. "May I confirm your meal selections?" she asked, her voice a touch more clipped than before. Nia smiled. "I'll have the seared halibut. And I'll have the grilled lamb, medium rare," Elias said. C. Dunn tapped the tablet but didn't look down. "Are you sure you don't want to see the menu again?" she asked pointedly. Elias tilted his head. "We've flown this route before. We know the options." Her lips twitched, not in a smile. "Very well," she said and walked off without another word. Nia raised an eyebrow. Did she just assume we didn't know the cuisine? "She's trying to find where the edges are," Elias replied. "She's testing us." Nia sipped her water, then leaned back. "Well, she's about to find out." Back in the galley, Dunn was not as composed. She stood with her arms folded tightly, whispering to another crew member, Jonas, a senior flight steward with a reputation for discretion. "There's something off about them," she said. "Who?" Jonas asked, barely glancing up from the tray he was organizing. "The couple in 1A and 1B. They don't fit the profile." Jonas sighed, not hiding his irritation. They have valid boarding passes. They've been nothing but polite. Dunn lowered her voice. Exactly. Too polite. Too composed. It feels rehearsed. Jonas paused. You mean professional? She bristled. I just think someone should verify their credentials. This is a premium cabin. We have to maintain standards. Jonas stared at her, deadpan. You want me to interrogate paying customers based on your gut feeling? Dunn flushed. I didn't say interrogate. Just double-check. You mean racially profile them? Silence. Jonas shook his head and walked away. Dunn stood alone, her thoughts churning. She didn't see herself as biased. She thought she was being careful, protecting the prestige of the airline. But even now, something in her burned, not with professionalism, but pride. She wasn't about to let anyone, especially anyone who didn't seem first class, make her feel foolish. Back in the cabin, the energy had shifted. Nia could feel it. The passengers who'd pretended not to watch them were now watching openly, disguising it poorly behind magazines or phones. The hum of quiet judgment was louder than the engines. I'm giving her one more shot, Elias said suddenly. Nia glanced at him. One more what? One more opportunity to do the right thing. After that. He trailed off. She knew what he meant. The reveal. They had agreed to hold back, to observe, to absorb, to give space. But once that line was crossed, once professionalism gave way to prejudice, there'd be no going back. The seatbelt sign dinged. The captain announced that the aircraft had reached optimal cruising altitude. The curtains to the galley were pulled back as the cabin crew began preparing for the meal service. Sure enough, Dunn approached once more. But this time, her clipboard was tucked under her arm, and her tone was sharper. I'm going to need to confirm your travel IDs, she said, her voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Elias blinked slowly. Excuse me? For international security standards, Dunn added quickly. It's not uncommon. Yes, Elias said evenly. It is uncommon. In fact, I've never been asked to confirm identity mid-flight on this route. Dunn faltered, realizing she had overreached, but pressed on. If you can just present your IDs, we can clear up any confusion. There was no confusion. Not from Elias. Not from Nia. And not from the half-dozen passengers now looking on with varying expressions of disbelief and discomfort. Nia reached into her handbag. She held up her passport. Would you like to call the captain now? She asked. Dunn hesitated. Because the name on that passport, Dr. Nia Moreau, matched a name that had been in dozens of industry publications. But it was Elias who delivered the final blow. Slowly, he reached into his inside blazer pocket and withdrew a matte black access card, emblazoned with a silver wing insignia and an ID number. He held it out without a word. Dunn took it. Read it. Her fingers went slack. The card read. Elias Moreau, Founder/Executive Chair, Airalium Airlines. The color drained from her face. And her? She asked quietly, her voice cracking. My wife, Elias said, still calm, and the chief strategy officer. There was no need for further words. In that moment, every assumption, every half-smile laced with doubt, every pause meant to undermine, collapsed into a single realization. She hadn't been protecting the airline. She'd been poisoning it. And now, she'd done so in front of the very people who'd built it. The silence following Elias's revelation was so thick it seemed to vacuum the air from the cabin. Dunn stood frozen, still clutching his executive ID card in her trembling hand. Her professional composure had been peeled back in an instant, revealing a woman stunned not just by authority, but by the weight of her own misjudgment. Nearby passengers glanced at one another, some in hushed awe, others shrinking into their seats, embarrassed by their own silent complicity. Elias remained standing, the posture of a man who didn't raise his voice to be heard, but let presence speak instead. His eyes stayed locked on Dunn, not with aggression, but a kind of cold clarity. You said earlier you were protecting the integrity of first class, he said, voice steady. Tell me, was it our skin that threatened it? Dunn's jaw moved, but no words came out. Nia slowly stood beside her husband, sliding her passport back into her handbag with deliberate grace. She faced Dunn directly, her gaze piercing but composed. We've spent years building an airline that represents more than just speed and service, she said. We built Aeroloom to connect people. To make the skies equitable, safe, human. Her voice didn't waver. And here you are, reminding us exactly why that work is still unfinished. From the front of the cabin, the cockpit door cracked open. The co-pilot leaned out, confusion on his face. Behind him, Captain Harland, a calm, respected pilot with a reputation for integrity, stepped into the aisle, sensing the unease that hung in the air. "Is there a problem?" he asked, eyes scanning the scene. Dunn turned toward him too quickly, nearly knocking her clipboard from under her arm. "There was just. I needed to confirm seating protocol, sir. It's been handled." Elias didn't break eye contact. "Captain Harland," he said, voice low, "I believe you may want to be aware of the situation." The captain's gaze flicked between Elias, Nia, and the visibly rattled Dunn. He stepped closer, his tone respectful. "I apologize, Mr. Moreau. Mrs. Moreau. I wasn't aware we had executive oversight on board today." "We were incognito for a reason," Nia replied, "but unfortunately, it didn't take long to discover what we needed." The captain's face tightened. "I'd like to speak with Ms. Dunn in private, if I may." Without waiting for her to respond, he gestured her toward the galley. Back behind the privacy curtain, Dunn stood stiffly while the captain closed the distance between them. "What exactly happened?" he asked. Dunn's voice cracked. "I didn't recognize them. I thought maybe they were. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. You questioned their credentials mid-flight. Humiliated them in front of other passengers. Based on what?" She swallowed hard. "It wasn't meant to escalate. I just didn't think they—" "Didn't think they what?" he interrupted sharply. Her breath caught. "They didn't fit the usual profile." The captain closed his eyes for a brief moment, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You understand how serious this is, right?" he said. "This isn't just a customer complaint. You just profiled the CEO and CSO of our company. You've endangered your career and more importantly, you've undermined everything we stand for." Dunn's defenses fell completely. Her arms hung at her sides. She nodded mutely. "You are relieved of service for the remainder of this flight," Captain Harland said firmly. "Return to the crew quarters. I'll take over your responsibilities." "But," she started. He raised one hand. "Not another word." Back in the cabin, Elias and Nia had returned to their seats. The atmosphere, though still quiet, had shifted from suspicion to reflection. A few passengers made eye contact now. Some looked away, ashamed. Mia, the younger flight attendant, approached cautiously. "Mr. and Mrs. Moreau," she said, her voice a soft whisper, "I want to personally apologize. I didn't know who you were, but that shouldn't have mattered." Nia nodded, a small smile at the corner of her lips. "Thank you, Mia. You've been professional and kind. That's all we ever ask." Mia's relief was palpable. "If there's anything you need during the flight, anything at all, please let me know." As she walked away, Elias leaned back and exhaled slowly. "I didn't want to play that card," he said. "I know," Nia replied, "but sometimes you have to stop the rot where it starts." They sat in silence for a moment, the soft jazz playing through the cabin speakers now strangely ironic. Then Nia spoke, eyes still fixed on the clouds drifting outside the window. "Do you think she learned anything?" Elias paused. "Hard to say. People don't change in one moment. But they can begin." In the crew quarters, Dunn sat on the small fold-down seat. Her hands were shaking. Her chest tight. The last 45 minutes played on a loop in her mind. Her arrogance. Her certainty. The expression on Elias's face. The tone of Nia's voice, not angry, but disappointed. Worse than any punishment, it was the realization that she had hurt two people who had never been anything but composed. Respectful. Generous with their grace. She wiped at her eyes roughly. No tears would change what she'd done. But maybe, just maybe, they could help her understand why she had done it in the first place. When the aircraft landed hours later, the cabin disembarked in awkward silence. Several passengers paused near Elias and Nia's seats, offering quiet nods, murmured thank yous, or in some cases, nothing at all, just the look of someone who would carry that moment for a long time. In the terminal, a small team from Heirloom's public relations and HR departments waited. They'd been informed of the incident mid-flight. A tall woman with a headset approached. "Mr. Moreau, Mrs. Moreau, we're so sorry about what happened. We've already begun drafting a response and reviewing our internal policies." Elias raised one hand. "This isn't about optics. It's not a press release problem. It's a culture problem. And it stops here." The woman nodded, chastened. "We want a meeting with the entire senior leadership team," Nia added. "Tomorrow. No spin. No legalese. Just accountability." "Yes, ma'am," the woman replied, quickly typing into her tablet. As they moved through the terminal toward their waiting car, Nia turned to Elias. "We've got work to do." He smiled faintly. "Always. But this time, it would be different." Because the mask had come off. And now, there was no hiding what lay beneath. The boardroom at Heirloom's headquarters gleamed with understated elegance, dark walnut walls, a brushed steel conference table that stretched the length of the room, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline of a city forever in motion. But that morning, the room was still. Senior executives sat in silence, the air thick with tension. Coffee sat untouched. Notepads remained blank. Most avoided making eye contact with the two people seated at the head of the table, Elias and Nia Moreau. They weren't just leading this meeting. They were the meeting. Nia leaned forward, folding her hands carefully in front of her. Her voice, when it came, was soft, but sharp as a blade wrapped in velvet. Yesterday wasn't an anomaly. The words dropped like stones into the silence. It was the result of a culture we've allowed to calcify, one that believes bias can be hidden behind professionalism, and that silence is the same as neutrality. Elias picked up from where she left off. "Let me be clear," he said. "The incident on Flight AL-184 may have featured my name and face, but it could have been anyone. It has been many." He slid a printed dossier across the table. On the cover, Internal Ethics and Inclusion Review, Confidential Complaints from 2023-24. "No matter how much we invest in training, no matter what posters we hang or slogans we print," he continued, "if the core of this company does not believe in its values, then all we've done is decorate dysfunction." There were nods from a few executives. Others looked stricken. Evelyn Hammond, the company's chief of human capital, finally broke the silence. "We've taken preliminary steps," she said carefully. "Patricia Dunn has been suspended. An internal review is underway." "That's not enough," Nia interrupted, her voice calm. "Suspending a single employee is reactionary. We need transformation. Structural. Relentless. And unapologetic." Evelyn swallowed. "What are you proposing?" Nia tapped a button on the tablet in front of her. Instantly, a screen on the far wall came to life. The header read, "Operation Phoenix, Rebuilding from Within." Bullet points populated beneath it, one by one. Company-wide listening sessions led by external facilitators. Anonymous bias reporting platform with real consequences. Equity audit of all hiring and promotion practices. Quarterly cultural transparency reports. Leadership performance metrics tied to inclusion benchmarks. A quiet gasp came from somewhere near the end of the table. "This isn't about policing thought," Elias said. "It's about evaluating behavior. Holding ourselves accountable. Becoming a company that no longer tolerates diversity, but expects equity." The head of global operations, a middle-aged man named Gerald, shifted uncomfortably. "Won't this open us up to legal exposure?" Nia's gaze snapped toward him. "You think we're not already exposed?" Gerald hesitated. "I just meant—" "No," Elias cut in, gentler but firm. "You meant that addressing the issue feels riskier than ignoring it. And that's exactly the mindset we have to dismantle." Meanwhile, in another part of the building, Patricia Dunn sat alone in a modest consultation room with neutral walls and a view of the employee garden below. Her uniform had been replaced with a simple blouse and slacks, her ID badge swapped for a temporary access pass labeled "Review Pending." The door creaked open. Evelyn Hammond stepped in, holding a digital tablet and a cup of tea. Patricia stood reflexively. "Ma'am." "Sit," Evelyn said gently. They sat across from each other, a space that felt both too intimate and too distant. "You understand why you're here," Evelyn said. "Yes. What happened on Flight AL-184 is more than a breach of professionalism. It's a breach of trust. Not just with two passengers, but with the ideals of our company." Patricia nodded, jaw clenched. "I know." Evelyn studied her carefully. "I need to ask you something direct. And I expect honesty." Patricia nodded again. "Was your behavior driven by bias?" Patricia didn't answer immediately. Her hands, clenched in her lap, slowly began to uncurl. I didn't think of it that way at the time," she said. "I told myself I was protecting the standards of first class. But the truth is, I saw them and assumed they didn't belong. I thought they had somehow gamed the system." Her voice broke slightly. "It wasn't protocol. It was pride. Fear, maybe. I've spent so long trying to prove I belonged in that cabin that I didn't even notice when I started guarding it like it was mine to gatekeep." Evelyn said nothing. She let the silence stretch. Then, "What do you think should happen next?" Patricia blinked. "I don't know. Would you accept an opportunity to rebuild?" Patricia looked up. "Do I deserve one?" Evelyn didn't answer directly. Instead, she handed Patricia the tablet. On the screen was a schedule of upcoming company-led inclusion seminars, mandatory for all employees. "The first step," Evelyn said, "is listening." Weeks passed. Then months. And slowly, like green shoots through ash, the transformation began. The Operation Phoenix initiative wasn't flashy. It didn't come with commercials or ribbon cuttings. But it came with conversations. With long, vulnerable meetings. With moments of confession and confrontation. Employees began sharing anonymously their experiences, of being passed over, of being judged, of being made to feel like passengers in their own careers. Patricia attended every seminar. At first, she sat in silence. Then, one day, she spoke. About shame. About defense mechanisms disguised as standards. About how hard it was to unlearn the habits that helped her survive in a system built on perception. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She asked for understanding, and earned it. Eventually, she was invited to assist in leading small group sessions. Reluctantly at first. Then willingly. Then passionately. Nia and Elias watched from a distance as the culture began to shift, not with explosions, but with roots growing deeper. One afternoon, Nia received a simple message on her internal heirloom inbox. "Thank you, for the chance to do better." PD. She stared at it for a long time before hitting reply. "It's not a chance. It's a responsibility. Keep carrying it. NM." On the one-year anniversary of Flight AL-184, Aeroloom held its first equity summit, inviting all staff, executives, partners, and even passengers, to take part in a day of panels, workshops, and testimonials. Patricia stood on the main stage. She told her story. Not the sanitized version. Not the corporate-approved soundbite. But the real one, raw, honest, transformative. "I thought I was upholding professionalism," she said. "But I was upholding prejudice. And I didn't even know it. Until the people I tried to exclude taught me what inclusion really means." She stepped down to a standing ovation. Elias and Nia were waiting for her at the bottom of the stairs. "You've walked a long way," Nia said. Patricia smiled, humbled. "And I still have further to go." "Good," Elias replied. "So do we." A soft golden light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Aeroloom's headquarters, casting long shadows on the polished hardwood floors of the newly opened Unity Atrium, a space designed for gathering, listening, and storytelling. It had once been a rarely used event hall. Now, it was alive with motion and memory. The morning air buzzed with quiet excitement as employees, executives, media, and guests filtered into the room. A sleek banner draped above the stage read, "Flight Forward, 1 year since AL-184." At the back of the room, Elias and Nia stood side by side, watching with pride, and with weight. This wasn't a celebration in the traditional sense. It was an acknowledgement. Of pain, progress, and purpose. "I didn't think it would look like this," Nia murmured, eyes scanning the crowd. "Neither did I," Elias said, his hand resting gently on her back. "But I'm glad it does." The past year had changed more than just policy. It had changed people. From the PR team to the gate agents, from HR directors to part-time technicians, Aeroloom had undergone a cultural excavation, and what had been buried under layers of professionalism was finally given light. On the stage, the event's first speaker took the podium. It was Andre Mullins, a ground crew supervisor who had submitted one of the very first anonymous reports after the incident on AL-184. He adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat, and began. "I've worked for this company for 12 years. I've loved it. But I've also endured things that didn't belong in any workplace, things I never thought anyone would care to hear. A year ago, I watched two leaders face a moment of humiliation and choose transformation instead of retaliation. That gave me the courage to speak. I wasn't just heard. I was believed. A beat. And that changed everything." He stepped back to a quiet wave of applause, more reverent than loud. Next came Miriam, a former intern who now worked full-time in the Community Outreach Division. She shared how the new scholarship program helped her sister begin flight school. How Aeroloom's youth program now ran workshops for underserved high school students dreaming of careers in aviation. More speakers followed. A training officer who had redesigned the employee onboarding program with equity at its core. A senior pilot who spoke of mentoring 3 black women now in flight school. An HR manager who'd once rolled their eyes at diversity training, now leading their own cross-cultural empathy sessions. And finally, Patricia. She stood in a simple gray suit. No clipboard. No badge. Just truth. "Most of you know who I was," she began. "But fewer know who I'm becoming. She recounted AL 184 without deflection. She spoke of bias not as something she had escaped, but as something she still worked through every day. "I don't believe in overnight redemption," she said. "But I do believe in everyday responsibility." She looked directly at Elias and Nia. "I was given a second chance not because I deserved it, but because this company decided no one is disposable when they're willing to grow." The applause was thunderous. Later that afternoon, the Moreaus walked through the atrium's gallery space, lined with portraits and stories of heirloom employees who had contributed to the company's transformation. They stopped at a plaque titled, "Names That Changed Us." It didn't list titles or positions. Just names. And one line at the bottom. "Change doesn't begin at the top. It begins at eye level." Elias ran his fingers over the engraved letters. "They're going to be watching what we do next," he said quietly. "They always have," Nia replied. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting the room in a honeyed glow, the final event of the day commenced, a round-table discussion with young interns, new hires, and heirloom leaders. A young woman in her early 20s stood up during the Q&A. Her name tag read Devon, intern, marketing. "How do you keep going?" she asked. "When change is so slow. When it's uncomfortable. When it feels like you're always swimming upstream." Elias smiled at her. "Not the practiced kind. The real one. Because we don't swim alone anymore." Nia added, "And because we know now, real progress doesn't come with applause. It comes with silence. With someone stopping themselves before acting on a bias. With someone speaking up when it would have been easier to stay quiet. With 100 invisible decisions we'll never get credit for." Devon nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Afterward, she approached Nia with a folded note. "It's from my mom," she said. "She flew on your airline last month. She's never felt safer." Nia blinked fast. Took the note. "Tell her we built it for her." Weeks passed. Spring arrived. Then summer. Heirloom was now featured in national headlines, not for scandal, but for solutions. A feature in Forbes called it the airline that changed mid-flight. Others followed, Fortune, Harvard Business Review, even The Atlantic. But the praise didn't distract Elias and Nia. Their focus remained internal. Everyday moments. Everyday accountability. In a quiet room at HQ, they reviewed the latest anonymous feedback report. One line stood out. "I never thought I'd feel seen in a uniform. But now, when I wear the wings, I feel like I belong to something true." They read it twice. And sat with it in silence. Then, one clear October morning, they boarded a routine flight. No fanfare. No inspection. No disguise, either. Just a husband and wife in two seats, side by side. A young flight attendant approached, eyes bright with nervous energy. "Mr. and Mrs. Moreau?" "Yes?" Elias answered. "I just wanted to say, I got into aviation because of what I read about AL 184. I saw how you handled it. I saw what came after. You gave me a reason to believe that maybe this industry really can change." Nia's eyes shimmered. "Then we've already succeeded," she said. As the plane soared into the sky, Nia looked out the window, watching the clouds drift by in soft waves. Beside her, Elias opened his journal and wrote a single line. "True altitude isn't measured in feet, but in how far we're willing to rise beyond who we were." Final reflections. It started with judgment. It became reckoning. It ended in rebuilding. But most importantly, it didn't end. Because justice doesn't end. Growth doesn't end. And the journey toward dignity and equity, like every true flight, begins not when we take off, but when we learn how to land better.